you can recommend everything you like, but you've always got to trade off about what is the interest of the owners, how much are they giving up of their own ownership, time, expense, and so forth, okay? They have interests, they have limitations. And one way to see this would be in terms of a big circle, all right? So that's something like a third, something like that. All right, and so in some ways, what was missing from your presentation, which it's missing because I see it wasn't there, but it doesn't have to be there because it wasn't part of your purview, was the why. And that is, okay, if you're going to do something, then why are you doing it? What's the driving force for the need for that, okay? So there's several driving forces and become more and more aware of that as we go through several cases in the next few weeks. But first we talked about selection. All right, we talked about selection. Selection, lovely. Let's change the way we do selection. Or if anything, let's just make it more formalised, standard operating procedures. But what do we mean? We need a particular criteria on which we select and then evaluate. And so in some ways you can formalise it by having 2 interviews during the selection process. And so then what one interview sees may be different from what another interviewer sees. So that's possible too to think about. I'll just turn that off for a moment. All right? So what is driving that? Well, what is driving the selection process, and you've already identified it, is the extent you want that the company wants fit or it wants a particular culture. All right? Now, that's got to be traded off against the technical skills that when people are employed in the organisation will deploy. And so when the people come in and work, and when they're deploying their technical skills, what are they doing? What are they doing with their technical skills? They're doing actions, right? They're programming, right? So it's great to have a creative person, but if they can't program, okay, not going to help us. At the end of the day, you've got to be able to do programming. So programming is very important. So it's a technical skill, and so there's actions. So we do need some kind of culture, but it's very important that we understand what actions need to happen in the organisation. What actions? So that's why at the selection process, part of it is technical, it's a culture, plus technical. You cannot make one more important than the other. Technical skills are very, very important because the company relies on programming the actions. Okay, so technical is very important. But we can have an SOP which can help, if anything, if we have an SOP, standard operating procedures, by having a list of criteria by which we select and deselect different people, it helps the knowledge transfer cost. It actually helps the owners reduce how much they have to think about the selection process. And possibly they may be able to delegate some part of the selection to some of their superiors. Okay? So there's that knowledge transfer cost. So the first why, the knowledge transfer cost, is driving maybe how you do selection, why you should formalise a selection. Otherwise, if there was no information overload, then the owners can continue to do the selection without formalisation. Okay? Actions are important. So what's supporting that? Well, partly is you've got structure. Currently the structure is as it is, and so the big question is, do we keep the structure as it is? Maybe we change it. When we get larger, double size, we may need a larger structure, maybe we need extra layers. And so that's a question that needs to be addressed. What would drive that? What would drive the structure? It's going to be, again, knowledge transfer costs. If we change the structure, we do it for a purpose, you do it for a benefit, you don't do it for, oh, let's change the structure, I'm a consultant, I've got to be able to recommend something. Okay, so structure is very important. And in some ways that's the D in DHL, isn't it? Right, you know that. If you get structure wrong, then you're going to get lack of direction. If it's too flat, then you're going to get lack of direction. So as you get larger, you may have to make it more vertical layers. All right. Notice with the selection, you're trying to deal with H&L. You're making sure that the people don't have limitations technically, and We're talking about hard work. Well, we're talking about that they will show an interest in being creative. Because everyone's creative. Everyone can be creative. It's whether they're interested in being creative. So in some ways, are they motivated that way? Okay, so there's H and L in there too. So you can relate that to D, H and L. In other words, if you get this wrong, you're going to have an H and L problem. If you get this wrong, you're going to have a D problem. See that? Hello, you know the DHL? All right? There's two ways you can motivate your prescriptions or your solutions. One way is just to think about the why. Okay? Knowledge transfer costs is going to drive this. As we're getting larger, we need to formalise more. It's going to drive the structure too. Okay? Or you can motivate to do this from the DHL approach. That is, what do we want to avoid? We need to do this in order to avoid this in the future. You with me? You can do both. You can do both. Finally, I think someone talked about formal performance appraisal. And this is more feedback. More feedback is better than no feedback. Frequent feedback is better than less frequent feedback. Scientific studies have shown that. So if you can formalise it, what is the benefit for the owners of Premium Soft to formalise the feedback? You've got to sell it as a benefit. You can't just say, oh, you need to do formal feedback because the textbook says so. Rubbish. Don't do it because the textbook says so. Think about it. Why would you want these owners to make things more formal here on the feedback? You need to have some evidence, or there's some studies that have shown connection between this and better performance. So again, of the DHL, what are we trying to avoid by having more formal performance appraisal? We're trying to avoid what? Yes, we're trying to deal with a possible potential H problem. What other problem are we trying to avoid? If any. L? Maybe not. Definitely D, okay? D, definitely D, all right? So now we get some structure, we have some reasoning why you're making these prescriptions. You see that? See how it gives more body to your recommendation and how you can charge 10 times more as a consultant? Okay. And what else can we do here? But the other thing too, when we're going from formal to formal, informal is like, okay, you and me, all right, and you're working for me, we have a relationship. We don't need to formalise everything because I see everything and it just costs even more to make it administration. It's just administration shackle around my neck if they're one person. But suddenly I've got 100 people working for me, then it's more administratively efficient to try and put those 100 relationships into some standardised form. So that's how we're trying to get efficiencies in that evaluation process. So it's all about size. Size is going to drive this, size of employees. And when you talk about size, of course, we're talking about knowledge transfer costs. Okay, knowledge transfer costs, the costs of evaluating 100 different people. Impossible, it'll take you a whole life, a whole year. Then you've got to start again a year later. Okay, so you standardise into a form and you knock it out in several days. Okay. Why would you standardise? Because when you have a one-to-one personality, you know all your friends, how you see them. Do you look at their personality and then break it down to 20 attributes? Hey, Gilbert, you're my friend. Yeah, you're a friend. You'll do anything for me on 9 out of 10, and you know, we see each other every month in 4 out of 10. You're good to talk to, maybe 1 out of 10. Do I do that evaluation? Right, it's kind of nuts to do that on a one-to-one. Okay, but once you get 100 people, you need to move that evaluation out of your mind into some form. Okay, standardised form. Then people look at that evaluation and see it to be more objective. Okay, when it's in the mind, it's subjective, and so people are not motivated by it as much because it's based on their personal, whether I like you or not. That's not very motivating. Okay, the boss likes you. And other people think, oh, the boss likes so-and-so, doesn't really like me as much. Is that really motivating? No, it's not. Okay, so that's the reason why you want to have more formal evaluation. And when it comes to formal, before you can't just say, oh, the solution is let's have more formal evaluation. No, it's not that easy. All right. Before you even do that, step one is, well, on what attributes do you want to have this formal evaluation? What things are important? Okay, promptness, come to time, come to work on time. Or even in the flexi time, just stay within that flexi time and don't extend that rule. So, for example, when you're working as an air hostess or male hostess trainee for Cathay Pacific, if you are late during that 7-week period once, they will kick you out of the program. Okay, you'll be 1 minute late, they kick you out. Why? Because being on time is very important for that job. Okay, unless you have a real excuse, you broke your leg and you're in hospital or something like that. Seriously, yeah. So I was talking to them on one flight once, and they were telling me all about this. Okay, all right. Better than Singapore Airlines, it takes 15 weeks to go through their programs. You have to be on time for 15 weeks, even worse, right? Okay, so that's a characteristic for Cathay Pacific, right? But that may not be a characteristic for premium soft. So you've got to work out what are the things that you, at a very minimum, need in your employees. And you list them out. These are not measures. Just list down the things that the desirable behaviour, desirable actions you like to see. In chapter 3, they talk about if you're going to have action controls, then you need to be able to see the action, right? So if you want them to engage in teamwork, well then you're going to need to attribute teamwork. If you want them to make suggestions, you may have attributes, suggestions. Okay? Whether you can measure or not is not the point in this first step. You just write down what do we desire. Then the second step is to try and think about how to measure that. So we may think in terms of the attributes here. Number one, what are the desirable attributes? Number two, you may try and measure them. Some of them may be measurable, more measurable than others. So, you may have to filter and cut it down a little bit. Okay? Then number three, you may want to link it to rewards. You may not. That doesn't mean they're not useful if you don't. But at least the formal system has begun once you've got to this stage here. Okay, whether you go to rewards, that's another step. And I wouldn't encourage them to go straight to rewards. Get the employees used to this measurement and this evaluation system. And link that evaluation system maybe to promotion or to a subjective bonus for general satisfactory progress on these areas, rather than formally link them. Get to know them, get to know those measures. Are you measuring them well? Some of them you may not be able to measure well, then you cut them out for the following year. You see, it's a trial and error process. There you go. That's how you would maybe put together some consulting framework, recommendation. Not just say do this, but here's how to do it and here's why you should do it. So there's 3 things you need to think about. Okay? What to do, here's how you do it, and here's why you should do it. Okay? So guys, you can do that? Alright. I'll put the report on my desk by Monday morning. How's that? Oh, sometime next week will be fine. Alright. So, we've got this. Put that together. I think this is something, and let's give this to the CEO and let's see what happens. How's that? Class, is that a good idea? Is that a good idea? Yeah, why not? Let's see what comes out of it. Alright? Okay, good. Have a break and we'll come back and we'll do our next case study presentation.